While the dumpster fire that is Scream 7 continues to burn, fans are speculating what this next entry should do next. An interesting fan theory that I've seen is retconning the last two movies and doing a direct continuation to 4, putting the focus back on Sidney Prescott. Would that be the solution to all of Scream 7's problems? Let's get into it. I look like Austin Powers. Scream 7 is currently in a defunct state of uncertainty, with many fans clamoring for solace. I'm making this sound way more overdramatic than it really is. With no apparent way to continue the story of the core 4 in the next entry with half of those members out of the picture, it seems the only way to jumpstart the story from this point is to put the focus back on the original final girl, Sidney Prescott. There's an issue here too though, because during the pre-production of Scream 6, it was announced that Neve Campbell will not be returning for the 6th entry due to a pay dispute. So with all of these apparent issues, where does the next entry of Scream go? Some have suggested a continuation from the 4th movie, retconning the last two radio silence-directed flicks that put the focus on a different character. The argument here is you could bring back fan-favorite characters like Dewey Riley and Judy Hicks, who were previously killed in Scream 2022. It also might be a more inviting deal for Neve Campbell, who would have the promise of a leading position, opposed to the supporting role she had in the same entry. An immediate problem with this, though, is the general audience. While this suggested fan theory would undoubtedly please longtime Scream fans, it could turn off casual viewers who would have to watch 4 movies they may or may not have seen before heading to the theater. With Scream 2022 following new characters and loosely continuing the story running through Screams 1 through 4, this was one of the many ways the writers had their cake and ate it too. This way, older fans could ogle over their past heroes, while the younger fans and newcomers could attach themselves to fresh protagonists like Sam and Tara. I think it would be in Scream 7's best interest for them to not have to rely on the stories of the past. That's the biggest thing with this movie. You don't want to ask people to watch a bunch of movies that came before it, or else you're gonna have to do what Scream 6 did and constantly remind them about the last 5 movies. I think a better route for Scream 7 is to pull a Halloween 2018, retcon all of the sequels, and branch off into a new timeline. I know some fans will likely reel back in terror over that idea, but if you're going to retcon sequels, you might as well start as fresh as you possibly can. There are even more nostalgic advantages to retconning all of the sequels. You could bring back nearly everyone from the original who is now dead in the timeline. Not only does this include Dewey Riley and Judy Hicks, but you could also throw Randy Meeks and Cotton Weary back into it. Without any established history either, you could make the wildest fan theories a reality, including a Stu Macher revival. Yeah, I said it, Stu could come back this way. Sure, an insanely heavy CRT TV dropped on his head and electrocuted him, but horror villains have survived worse in the past. My biggest problem with Stu returning in the current timeline is there's so much proof that he's dead, especially in Scream 6. You can't do a Stu revival film in the same timeline where Scream 6 happened. That just simply would not make sense. The writers in the marketing department basically gave the middle finger to that side of the fandom by teasing a Stu return in this mysterious subway poster, and then by killing one of their own ghost faces with that same TV. It was a dirty tease, but I found it pretty funny. The big point here, though, is that you could rewrite history and give Sidney's story an entirely different conclusion. Instead of Sidney's secret brother, who was also a famous movie director, being the one to incite the Ghostface killings, what if it was just Billy and Stu? You could revisit Kevin Williamson's original pitch for Scream 3 that saw a group of Woodsboro High stab fans grouping together to kill Sidney once and for all. With Scream 2 also being retconned, technically the Stab movies, the faux film franchise that exists within the world of Scream, doesn't have to exist. This opens up more possibilities for Scream 7 to kind of just do whatever it wants. The in-universe Stab movies are something that some fans have said weighed down the sequels. In this path, you'd have the option to use them or get rid of their existence entirely. You could expand upon Ghostface utilizing the internet to spread their hateful message, you could pick and choose which sequel characters still exist, and there would be significantly less rules you'd have to follow in order to tell a new story. The criticism of how many people want to kill Sidney Prescott is now completely out the window, because technically it's only been 2 guys. There's infinite possibilities by doing the Halloween 2018 style sequel, opposed to just the direct continuation to 4. If you do a direct continuation to 4, the Stab movies have to exist, there's no fresh characters, and we're back to coming up with lame soap opera inspired reasons to tell another Sidney focused story. Like, do we really want to see Sidney's secret uncle go after her for another revenge motive? I don't. With all of that being said though, I still think there's a better path for Scream 7 to take. The best route the franchise can take at this point is making amends with its former cast and finally moving on to pocket stories. In Scream 2022, it was established that Sidney and Mark Kincaid were married with children in a seemingly thrown away line of dialogue. Telling one final story with Sidney as the focal character defending her family against Ghostface solves the biggest issue with her in the spotlight again. Sidney in a matriarchal role could reinvent the character if it were written properly. The new Ghostface wouldn't be going after her, they would be going after her family, which also makes the motive something a tad more interesting than stale old revenge. Let me rephrase that. It could make the motive actually something interesting and not the same thing we've seen in pretty much most of these movies. Sidney gets her happy ending after killing off the last Ghostface and drives off into the sunset with Mark Kincaid. That might be the end of the Sidney story, but I don't think it would be the end of the Scream franchise, because as a lot of us know, franchises don't die until that money train goes off the hill. I'm not a betting man, but if I were, I would put all my chips on franchise continuations following this new trend of pocket stories. This is where you take the familiar situation established in a past movie and apply it to a modern continuation with entirely new faces and plot lines. Some good examples are Prey, the 5th entry in the Predator franchise, and Evil Dead Rise. These movies were both wildly popular and praised by both audience members and critics alike. Even if you don't like these movies, they are undeniably way easier to execute compared to the current trends of requels. Requel movies oftentimes tell overinflated stories with too many characters in order to appeal to the most amount of people. I'm personally not the biggest fan of the requel formula because you lose simplicity, killing any chance to strive to the same lengths of a predecessor. They weren't trying to shove legacy characters into the Scream 1 story, so why should Scream 2022 have to suffer by trying to force older characters into that narrative? I would argue that Scream 2022 would have been a better film if they had just focused on the new characters entirely. My hopes are that Scream 7 can work as reconciliation to disgruntled fans who are rightfully upset about certain updates from the past year or so. Many cast members have been unjustly fired or sent away for various absurd reasons. Bringing Neve Campbell back to play Sidney Prescott is a great starting point there. After that, I hope to see the Scream franchise try something new by telling a contained Ghostface story with brand new characters. This time, they will hopefully avoid the mistakes made in Scream 2022. I personally love the character of Sam Carpenter and Melissa Barrera's performance in both 5 and 6, but she didn't initially connect with everybody. Some fans felt underwhelmed after leaving the theaters in 2022, saying Sam's performance felt off and that being Billy's secret daughter was weird. While I agree with the latter there, the Billy hallucinations are thankfully just a small part of that character. I like Sam, but she's definitely not perfect, unfortunately falling into the biggest problem with this franchise, which is its soap opera writing. It's a crux to make the story in the movie work, but an unnecessary one still. Why couldn't Sam have just been a resident of Woodsboro struggling to maintain a relationship with her family? Her boyfriend Richie could have moved to town 6 months before they started dating, and we'd still have the same story minus the fluff. Richie's plan still makes sense because he would just need someone to blame for the murders, riling up the media and Hollywood on Ghostface attacks yet again. Richie's motive was to make Hollywood make better movies, right? Billy's secret love child doesn't have to exist in order to do that. The most important takeaway from this video, though, is that the Scream franchise has to cut ties with the past. While at one point that aided the Scream franchise, the nostalgia is now slowly killing it. Scream 6 made a good chunk of its movie about that while skimming over grand new ideas that could have fueled a whole new direction for the franchise. What if Scream 6 was about 3 ghost faces in a cult versus just borrowing the same motive from another sequel? Or what if the entire movie was shot from Jason and Greg's perspective, who in this reality were the only ghost faces of the film? Love those ideas or hate them, it's a fresh new direction for the franchise. At the very least, it would make these movies stand out and not just feel like something we've already gotten before in the past. I'm hoping to see something along those lines in Scream 8, but first there's some unfinished business that needs to happen in Scream 7. What do you guys think is the best direction for Scream 7 moving forward? Leave me something about it in the comments below. Thank you all so much for watching this brand new Scream 7 theory. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more horror movie content in the future. Please consider supporting me on Patreon by clicking on the link in the description below. And as always, don't forget to kill it out there, y'all.